Welcome to GBIRL, the podcast looking at the real business world of esports, gaming, and streaming with the people and personalities behind it all. Here is your host, Bill the Conqueror.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for being here today. Now, if you remember I think it's about 7 months ago, I interviewed three incredibly smart people, Dr. Goku, Dr. Kelly, and Dr. Bean, about their, I guess you call it an all-encompassing program to help streamers with their mental health, to provide better access to resources. And one of the pieces that was really interesting to me was, I believe it was Dr. Bean. He's directly involved with the program that he created called Geek Therapeutics, where they provide information and training to licensed counselors to help them better interact with gamers and sort of gaming culture. And I have with me today, you see her there on the screen. She is a graduate of the Geek Therapeutics program, and I apologize right off the bat when it comes to your name, if I destroy your name. I am sorry. I actually, so on LinkedIn, I looked at it like 7 times to make sure it was typed correctly, because the R and the E looked like they should be like reversed. But anyways, so I have with me today Kayla Ayers Tuttle.
Yes, perfect pronunciation.
Yes, Kayla Ayers Tuttle. Right, perfect. Starting off on a good foot. I have with me today, and she's a graduate of the Geek Therapeutics certification program. I thought it would be a really interesting conversation after talking to those 3 PhDs. I mean, they're like insanely smart individuals, to get with somebody who had gone through the program, received the certification, and figure out, okay, what does that mean in actual practice? Because everybody has theories, ideas are cheap, execution is not, and execution is what actually matters. So, Kayla, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
All right, so just a fast little background on yourself. Talk about where you came from as far as an education, and also going to how you came about this program, because I'm sure as a therapist you get a lot of people calling you going, hey, you should try this, hey, you should do this, hey, you should think about this. What is it about the Geek Therapeutics program that you thought was valuable?
Well, first of all, I'm a master's level clinician. I am an LPC, licensed professional counselor in the state of Michigan, and I got my undergrad, my Bachelor of Science from Eastern Michigan University, where I studied psychology, primarily interested in criminology and human sexuality.
Okay.
And then I went on to get my master's in mental health counseling from Siena Heights University, another college in Michigan, where I studied mental health counseling. And the Geek Therapeutics program it was marketed to me on, I believe it was Facebook, I want to say. So Kudos to their marketing team coming through to me.
All right. Sounds good.
Probably has something to do with my searches of geek fandom and mental health all in one. And There are so many things that are marketed to us as clinicians, but something just, it's such a unique lens, especially because I work with a lot of children and adolescents. And I think it's just such a unique perspective. And so all encompassing in some ways, like just a different way to view mental health and really get through to some of these people who may have thought it wasn't possible or weren't comfortable to approach it in the first place. And I was kind of like a closeted nerd, I think, when I was growing up. So this was like kind of like being able to wave my geek flag and do my job and just love both of them.
Okay, so you have this certification. What does this certification actually mean for you? I mean, it doesn't come off as some sort of like nationwide license yet. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, for people who don't know how standards and practices work, in order for something to change, it has to start at a low level and work its way up over time as it proves itself. So for you, you have your master's, you're a professional counselor. What does this certification actually mean for you?
I think it's really just providing some legitimization of mental health and nerd culture, and that there's other ways to reach people. I think we've just been on this very linear path for a long time with mental health, and mental health is anything but linear. And so it kind of speaks to that as well. And just kind of it's a really good place to start as far as communication goes. Like, it's a different filter, and just to be able to connect with people in some of these environments that don't maybe either have access to great mental health or are too afraid to even approach it in the first place. It just kind of gives some conversation around it, kind of stopping some of the stigma around it. So it's just a great intersection.
Okay, so one foundational concept around communication is vocabulary. And the simplest way to put it is each tribe has its own vocabulary, its own lexicon that of terms it uses to refer to things that basically people make up words that fit them and their group. So I guess a really easy place to start is talk about some of the vocabulary that you had to learn, because you can be smart with books, but if you're video game smart, it's a completely different thought process. And so when I was going over this interview and getting prepped, one of the thoughts in my head was, is this just like a giant vocabulary course or something?
Yeah, for some people it might be that might be kind of the start of what reels them in. Right. Even like for parents of kids, I'm sure they could probably learn a lot in this program. And I believe they have like different levels of kind of what that looks like. Right. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of terminology to learn, but if you're already familiar with the terminology, that helps. But it's also kind of designed for that beginner also to learn. There's different fandoms they go into, there's different games they go into, and there's a lot of the psychology research background element, and then there's like, how do we apply that through the lens of video games, like in a practical sense, or like looking at it through different games or fandoms and that kind of thing.
Okay, so if you had to talk to a parent about, hey, look, I'm going to sit down with your kid. This is some of the stuff we're going to talk about. And your parent goes, he keeps saying these words and I have no idea what they mean. So when you talk with parents and you explain words like poggers or PogChamp, or trying to explain terminology in Fortnite versus terminology in PUBG versus terminology in Warzone, or even League of Legends. I mean, every game has its own verbiage. So how do you talk to parents? How do you get them to be sort of on the same wavelength as their kids?
Yeah, that's one of my areas I really like, is working intergenerationally. So like with a parent or caregiver and a child or teen. So any opportunity that we have to spend together and kind of go over some of those things, I'll set up, or I do a lot of parent consultation and kind of just provide them some of the language to talk. And even if it's not, it helps if it's specific to the game, but also just kind of the terminology or lexicon of like leveling up and experience points. Right. And it's not a new concept of kind of making things a game for kids or teens. So even like chores and, life skills and social skills, like if you can kind of approach it with some of this language that they're being surrounded by in social peer groups and at school and online, like if you can kind of speak their language, they're going to hear you a little better.
Okay. So give me an example of that conversation. And before I get into that, I realize that you have NDAs and there's a very specific line we cannot cross when you talk about specific client details, and I totally get that. But do you have an example of a conversation like that?
Yeah, I've had a few. I think it helps to be like, the more versed you are in different games and books and shows and that kind of thing helps. I actually had an experience where there was a video game that thankfully I had played because it was very like a indie game. It's probably several years old at this point, but I had a teenager write a suicide letter, which is very, very concerning. One of the most concerning kind of things that you can get to. But she came in with mom and I was reading it. And then I just kind of turned to her and I was like, have you ever played Doki Doki Literature Club? And she was like, yeah, I'm playing right now. And the suicide letter was like written through the perspective of one of the characters.
Wow.
And she didn't even really feel that, like she really didn't feel suicidal like when we started talking about it, but just kind of having like that knowledge going in, like if she had landed on anyone else's caseload, I am almost certain, you know, like safety precautions would have been taken and just the whole gambit of things, which is absolutely needed. But I think I was just kind of able to add a unique perspective of like, she was just trying to be like this character. So we had a conversation around that, about what that looks like and needs and wants and safety and that kind of thing with emotions.
Okay, so it's really, really interesting that you bring that up, that this person writes a suicide letter, but you have the perspective of, this sounds like a character in a video game, and you ask them, and I would bet like immediately, as soon as you brought that up, that person who wrote the letter kind of like turned to you like, yeah, like, and you instantly had that connection of like, this person gets me. So I know that as humans grow and evolve, that as we experiment with ourselves to figure out who we are, what do we value, what do we want in our life, who do we want to be like, who do we not want to be like, that some people spend an awful lot of time living through the characters in their game. They decide, oh, I want to be that person, so they dress like them, they talk like them, they act like them, and some people get stuck at that point. And I mean, I would wager, and please tell me if I'm wrong, I would wager that your training, your certification, you can see that sort of thing and then give people tools and a pathway to kind of move beyond identifying themselves as something that doesn't actually exist. It's a computer program that responds in a way that it's supposed to, doesn't really have independent thought. So So when you had this, so before you had the certification and then to now, do you see yourself, how do I phrase this? Do you see yourself having a different understanding of how young people sort of find their way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with any age group, if you can connect via a game or some sort of pop culture reference, I talk to so many kids and teens, and they're kind of, we've all been there of like, you just don't get it. You're an adult, like da da da. But yeah, if you can kind of go through that lens, like I talk all the time with kids about, I'm big on like safety, because safety is kind of like the foundation to explore these emotions and relationships and behaviors and things. And a lot of times they'll say like, I feel really safe when I'm in my world because I have control. And then you kind of break that down of, okay, like, well, what kind of values do you have? And how does that show up in your real life versus like, you know, your online life or your avatar life or whatever the game is? And just kind of talking through that lens of like, what are the differences? And like, how can we pull some of this made up world into your everyday living, like where you feel more safe and you feel more expressive and comfortable?
Yeah, because there's even, so as far as the pandemic, even before the pandemic, you had people that would literally only leave their house because they had to get food. Otherwise, and even now, you don't even have to leave your house to get food. You can get 99% of everything you need like sent to you, or you can consume it online. And it seems like the pandemic kind of exacerbated the fact that you could be a shut-in and turn yourself into something else that you think you want to be based upon what you're reading and looking at online. So I guess the next good question is, going through the coursework, were there things that you thought you knew about mental health that when you were going through this process, it gave you kind of a new insight?
Yeah, we all kind of have like our different fandoms or things we're drawn to.
Right.
There were a lot of areas that I just didn't know a whole lot about. LARPing, I've never participated in. I think it's really awesome. And I learned a lot about it, about how it can be applied to mental health, and different fandoms that I'm just not as familiar with. And it kind of just provides that solid understanding with other people, like as space to explore, which has been really expansive, I think, as far as education and connection goes.
Interesting. Okay, so the coursework itself, is it, as far as the program, how long does it take? How long does it take, and what is the actual coursework? I mean, what are you doing? Are you just reading documents? Are you watching videos? Is there an actual practical portion? Do you? I believe it was Dr. Bean was the one who came with this. So are you just reading documentation? Do you have one-to-ones with Dr. Bean? How's that process work for you?
Yeah, logistically, there's all of that. There's each course, you can read through it if you're more just, kind of visual. There's videos, there's presentations, and they have live presentations. And then if you're not able to make the live ones, there's like a whole catalog online of ones that you can watch.
Okay.
And go back to over and over if you want to kind of like, I think I had a Google Doc going when I was kind of like studying through the different things, and it's probably like 60 pages long at this point or something. I was just kind of taking the tidbits and like, yeah.
60 pages on a Google Doc.
Yeah, wow, okay. Yeah. So there's quite a lot of content there. Yeah, and there's consultations. They have a team of different people just depending on what your interests are, or like your population you work with, or just who you want to connect with as far as their expertise goes. There's, I want to say, like 4 different people you can consult with on their team. And as far as going through the program, it depends who you are. Like, I think it's kind of, I want to say it's designed to take like a year, but I'm just like, I'm very passionate about learning. And so when I see something that I want to learn, I will like go at it with everything. So I think mine was a little shorter than most, but typically probably about a year if you're, doing it in moderation and balance with having a life.
Okay. So has the certification opened up some doors that open up some professional doors that weren't there before?
Yeah, I think so. It's been really hard to do like groups or anything like that during COVID, just with logistics and safety type concerns, but I'm looking to start some more like RPG groups, role-playing games, right, and just like how to utilize these different kind of techniques. And it helps just kind of having that, like, I've gotten so many questions from, I work in 2 different roles with my job, and they're just like, what is geek therapy? And just getting to have that conversation with people about like, it's not just this like made up, Wonka version of mental health or something, but it actually, like, there's some legitimacy behind it, and we can really use this to our advantage.
Yeah, I do remember the conversation that I had with Dr. Goku, Dr. Bean, and Dr. Kelly, and one of the things that struck me about that is that you as a therapist will have immensely more success the better the better that you can identify with the person in front of you, or the people in front of you, or whatever that means. And then you can also make that connection stronger, especially when it comes to teenagers and young adults, by interacting with the parents, because the parents have a genuine vested interest. They just don't know what to do. So for you, when you finish this coursework, can you give me like one or two moments where you're like, oh my gosh, this works. This is actually doing what it's supposed to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like within the program or just like in practice?
In practice.
Yeah, one of the things that I use a lot, and there's a whole presentation within the program, but it's all about gamer motivation. So like based off the types of games they play, like what are motivating factors? And that can tell you a lot. Like if someone does a lot of games with world building, likely, not always, but there's an aspect of control involved. Like that's really important to them to be able to control their environment around them. So, okay, you like to control this in the game, you like to set up things this way. What does that look like in your life? Or like, what are some areas where you can let go of that control or, share that with someone else? Yeah, it's just a unique lens to kind of approach different topics, and identifying with characters is huge. Like, which character do you think you share strengths with? Which ones do you share vulnerabilities with? And you can do that through any sort of media, really. Within pop culture and geek fandoms, but yeah, like it's externalized in a certain sense, which really helps. Like it's outside of them, but they're able to see their inner world through an external character, which is pretty powerful.
So right there, when you're talking about world building games and control, that sort of resonated with me, because I like to put Destiny 2, and I like feeling like a superhero space wizard. I like shooting laser beams out of my hands, and I like being able to fly like Superman and smash into things. So can you? This is going to be a really weird question. Can you sort of predict what you're going to talk about with somebody based upon the game they play?
It depends on a lot of factors. Sometimes, like with younger kids, they really don't get that connection. So it's pretty easy to kind of, see it play out in a sense. But with older ages, it's a little more tough because there are more factors kind of being involved. Right. Whereas with younger kids, family is really the main social unit. They're like emotional boot camp, teaching them behaviors and emotions and that kind of thing. But yeah, sometimes it provides a great kind of intro, like to get into a topic if we're going to talk about a game, and then kind of where that leads or where that strays, like, and thinking about ages and age appropriate content and that sort of thing too can be a really unique lens to go through.
So what you're saying is that Fortnite players don't necessarily have a tendency to talk about a certain set of issues, whereas people who play League of Legends to talk about a certain set of, I guess what I'm getting at is, do League players talk about a certain number of things more often than Fortnite players talk about a certain number? I guess is the point I'm getting at.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, because overall, I'm not sure specifically with those, but like with those kind of games, what I look at is what's bringing you into this game. So like if they're saying I say, do you play with your friends or do you play alone? Like that's a question I'll ask a lot, because that kind of gives you some insight to if their parents, mad at them because they're spending 8 hours a day on this game, but that's the only opportunity where they can connect with friends, especially during a global pandemic. Like they're just missing their friends, like they're just looking for connection, which we can't really fault them on that. That's a human need. Right. So it just kind of provides a really good space to kind of work through those things of, okay, like, so you really want connection, and then this is the only way that you think you can get it. So how do we go about that in real life?
Okay. And then right there, so that last bit about real life. So I know a lot of parents don't think that friends you never see face to face, but you talk to online, aren't actual friends. Yet I had some really close relationships with people I have never met face to face, but they are my friends and I care about them genuinely. how do you communicate to the parents of these kids sometimes that, hey, these are actual real friendships, and it's important to see them as such?
That can be incredibly validating, but it is tough to get, I think, especially parents with generational issues, if they didn't grow up with a lot of this technology, depending on their age, and to get them to see how it can be very beneficial from a social perspective and emotional perspective as well. Just how validating and reassuring it can be, because that's tough. And especially right now, I think when kids are spending their whole day online for schools that are online and all that, it's even tougher. But absolutely. I mean, connection can be made in any number of ways. I still go over all the, media safety, and kids are just kind of like, I know, like, don't tell them where you live, don't tell them what school you go to, all those things. But once they kind of have that foundational knowledge, and the parent is reassured that they have that knowledge, and they're going to, like, age appropriate chat rooms and all that kind of thing. But if we can kind of come to an agreement in that sense, we can look at it as like there's an opportunity for growth, and not like, where do we need to limit this time?
Okay. So have you had a situation in your practice so far where you see kind of like a parent and a teenager, can be a boy or a girl, doesn't matter, where they go through the process a little, the parents get some understanding, a kid has a little bit deeper understanding of themselves, and you see the moment where the parent sits next to the kid and they're playing the game, and they're on the same wavelength. They're both excited, and the parent's like, I now have a genuine connection with my kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you can get a kid or a teen to, and this can be really anything, but anything that they're passionate about, like if they can teach their parent something, because if you think about their whole life as adults, usually telling them what to do and what not to do, and I'll teach you how to do this. But if they can feel like masters and have autonomy to a certain degree, like, and I can share this with an adult who's always like, there's that power differential, then that can be just incredible, of like, we're on equal playing ground in a sense, as far as communication and space giving goes.
So when you see that happening for yourself, what's that like for you?
Well, I'm human, so I light up. I kind of keep my professional face on, but I just really try to reinforce it. I love working with parents and kids as a duo, and together and apart, and that sort of thing. And just being able to validate, like, what was that like for you to, like, see how passionate he is about this, and then it's like, I don't know, it just gives ground for both of them to kind of explore their interests and to find more commonality than differences.
I do understand that you have to maintain your professional demeanor, but there has to be a point when you're like sitting in the bathroom and you're like, I did it. Yes, it works. It worked. Right.
Oh yeah. I have I need to like brand the term for it or something, but I love, like, I'll come home to my husband and be like, I had the counselor win moment today, and I'm just like beaming about something that happened. And I love connecting with people. And I think it's really tough right now too, because we're all like wired with touch, and like I'll hug clients if they're okay with that and that kind of thing. But it's just tough, when you have those moments of either really negative content comes up or something really positive and a breakthrough, and you can't embrace them or be there for them in a way.
Yeah, I do have to say that the entire reason I play Destiny 2 is that my son said to me, Dad, you should download this game. It's free, and I'll play with you. Oh, I'm on that. I'm with it. Whatever that looks like, I'm there. And then, like, this still gets me to this day. He spent his own money to buy me DLC. He spent his own money to buy his dad DLC, and I'm like, okay, whatever it takes to learn this game, I am totally doing it, because I just want to spend time with my son. And the fact that my son bought it for me. I was actually saving up to get it. My son bought it for me. And I'm like, okay, I'm not supposed to cry, but I did, and it was pretty awesome. So I could definitely say that gaming, it's very important to me because it reaches across generations. It brings hope. It connects people. It has made my life better, and I will extol that virtue for the rest of my days. So when you talk to other counselors and talk to other therapists about this who may not have gone through what you've been through with the coursework, however, they have people in their practice, in their communities, like, who are gamers and they're having a difficult time relating. If you talk to those people and you say, I've gone through this certification, here's the people backing it, what do they say back to you? And I guess, how do you convince them of the value?
Yeah, I think it depends on the person and their kind of experience. I think it's interesting because it's two things that have been traditionally stigmatized for a long time. I think there's kind of stereotypes with gaming and there's stereotypes with mental health. And so to kind of combine those two and like, where do they intersect and how can we use this in a productive, meaningful way has been really incredible. As far as convincing people or validating it to a certain degree, it depends. I think there's a lot of language to be developed around this, and we're getting there. And to be able to describe it in a clinical sense, it's kind of like playing flip-flop. So like your clients, you're like starting with, the geek approach, and then you're like working mental health in. And I think with clinicians that may be a little skeptical, you're kind of starting with the mental health stuff and like weaving in the geek, references and like, oh, they said they play this. And then they also have this going on at home. Like, have you ever talked to them about the connection? And they're kind of just like, no, like they never really, they don't have like that creative muscle, I think, developed sometimes, like to make those connections or to see, they're just kind of like, oh yeah, they play video games just like, every kid does these days is the sense that some clinicians have. But overall, my peers and colleagues have been really embracing of this, and they're just very curious and to seek more knowledge about it. So we're moving in a good direction.
Well, and I think that having a group behind it, like Dr. Goku, Dr. Kelly, and Dr. Bean, is huge. Isn't Dr. Kelly a clinician?
I believe so.
Okay, and that is valuable because having somebody like Dr. Kelly, who has that sort of background and training, he can talk to other clinicians and say, here's what I found, here's the research that you can read that will help you. Because in the end, you're not dealing with any new concepts. There's people finding a place to belong, having self-worth, finding ways to recover from trauma, feeling empathy towards other people, feeling sympathy towards other people, having an emotional resilience. These are not new concepts. These are base human things that everybody deals with. But now what you have as far as extra tools, you now have an understanding of culture, of the various games, of the different genres, and it's just a new way to relate. And a lot of people who are clinicians are very methodical. They're very, this is my box, I cannot go outside my box because I'm researching everything in this box. Well, then you need to make your box larger because there's a lot going on. And people who are clinicians who try really hard to make mental health as scientific as possible when it's really hard to do. I don't know if anybody realizes that. And so that's a great tool to have in your belt. And in the end, this is just vocabulary to me. To me, this is like learning the current reference for having faith and having trust in something. It's just a different way of thinking about it because we have all this technology. We have a different understanding of the world. I can talk to people in Zambia like today if I wanted to on a video call. It's just it's bizarre how this works. You have this across the world connection from 5 feet in front of you. How does that work? It's so I guess as far as you personally and professionally, what has this done for you?
Yeah, it's so one of the biggest areas I work with is trauma. It's
Okay.
kind of something that landed in my lap, and then I started talking to people, and everyone's gone through different things. And I think this has just allowed such an incredible lens to look through for both kids and adults, and teens, everyone in between, as far as even just superheroes. Like, still not, not a new concept of they have strengths and they have flaws or vulnerabilities, but kind of linking those up and kind of having a deeper conversation surrounding it. I think we're like digging in deeper instead of just the surface level. Like, what are you good at? What are you not so good at? But like, where do your values lie and where do you operate from? Like, how do you go out and build passion and purpose within the world, like knowing that you have this set of qualities?
So when we talk about gamers, there is the perception that it's predominantly men, boys who game. There is a percentage that are female. So in your experience, in your counseling therapy experience, do you see more boys and men versus girls and females, or is it about the same?
As far as gamers in practice?
Yes.
Yeah, it's pretty equal. I think especially with these like battle royale type games, like every one of a certain age is playing some sort of game, or at least Among Us, or some mobile game. Even I think that's traditionally been the notion of like just boys game. But it's also kind of, we look at what we push and what we reward and what we, stray men and women and girls and boys against or for. So there's a lot of socialization that comes into play. But yeah, I think it's been really expansive, and for women and girls to also have a voice to say like that this can be one of their passions, and it's not just like a sport for boys, but they can also have a play.
So do you find yourself interacting with girl gamers different than boy gamers?
That's a good question. A little bit. Like, I think, yeah, because just communication wise, so boys and men are more like, let's do something alongside together, kind of that play aspect. And we'll build intimacy in that way in communication. Whereas girls and women tend to be a little bit opposite of like, let's build the intimacy and trust and relationship building before I want to jump into something together.
Okay.
So that might look like playing a game or something with a boy, like in person first, before we start developing the conversation around different topics. Whereas often girls or women, just depending on their circumstances, but usually they want to kind of talk first. And that's like how they know if you're safe. Whereas I would say boys are more of that, like, let me approach you and let's do this activity together, and then I'll see if I want to open up.
Interesting thought process. So is that thought process the same across everything, just gaming?
I don't think that's just pertaining to gaming. It's been my experience. I took a lot of like gender communication type classes when I was going through schools. And I think that that's kind of what we see, like as far as play goes, from infancy all the way up to, full grown adulthood, as far as bonding and attachment goes.
So you mentioned earlier that your focus is on trauma. Do female gamers process their trauma differently than male gamers?
That is a very insightful question. I think, yeah, I would say so based on my experience. I think women and girls tend to be a lot more like inner world, and men and boys tend to be a lot more outer world for processing. So it's a lot of like, and this is not like across the board. I have some boys I work with that are incredibly sensitive and are very internalize things. But often girls are more like like there's a lot going on internally, and then it's like they need some help kind of bringing it out. And I also love working with like Sand Tray and doing some like play therapy type of stuff too, because it's just for boys especially, like they need that visual of like what emotions look like and these different and traumas and mental health type topics, whereas girls can kind of like they go inward a little bit more in my experience and reflect more before kind of like coming out with their conclusion.
Interesting. Okay. So you're saying that boys have a tendency to act out a little more than girls?
Yeah, to be more like physical, like with their emotions, I'd say.
In your experience, do female gamers have a tendency to gravitate to certain genres of games as opposed to boys in order to, I guess, to find their place to belong or to process their own trauma?
Yeah, most girls I talk to, they're much more of like the mobile app type games based.
Okay.
Fortnite is widely popular, boys and girls across the board. That's just kind of been this like big one that we've come across that you'd have to be living under a rock to not know about. But
right.
Yeah, I think they're more of the just like quick little games, or even games that are kind of like world building in a sense, but like with a cute or like more approachable like relationship building focus. Like I'm kind of thinking about like Animal Crossing, like those types of worlds where there's not only like the world building aspect of a game and collecting and resourcing and things, but there's also an interpersonal aspect to it, which some games are missing. Not as much like combat heavy or things like that.
So when we talk about like world building, collecting, evolving, it seems to me games like a Pokemon are so successful because they have that cross appeal. I mean, you can search for Pokemon and you can search areas in the game, but then there's also the battle aspect, right?
Yeah, that's one that's they were very smart in their design, I would say, as far as gender differences go, because it has both of those, and it's definitely a game that's very diverse and that you could be working towards any number of goals. Like I want to build up my decks and collect them all, or I want to just battle and get ridiculously strong and buff and like whatever, like, or you can do all of those things if you're interested in both of them, but very unique in that sense.
Wow, I am fascinated each and every day by how gaming has really ingrained itself into our culture through design, through storytelling, and I think that games like Pokemon have solid stories, have a tendency to last longer, and the way that people, I guess, the way that people find themselves in the game. So. I mentioned it earlier. I mentioned earlier about people identifying themselves through a character in a game, and then trying to move beyond that. I think that it's very easy to get lost in a game because game developers spend so much time putting so much depth into a game where you can literally live on the holodeck of the Enterprise, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Kayla. I really appreciate your insight. If people want to connect with you, how do they do that?
I'm on Instagram. Adventures with Rain, RAYNE is my Instagram.
Adventures with Rain. Okay, got it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Yes, and you can also find Kayla on LinkedIn. That's where I found her. I searched the name. I even spelled it correctly on the screen that you see in front of you. So Kayla, thank you very much for making time for me today. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks so much, Bill.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Please do like, share, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I will put the interview with Dr. Bean, Dr. Kelly, and Dr. Goku in the eye above my head that you will see right there. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you for tuning in today. You can find links to everyone on the show in the description below. Check out Bill the Conqueror on Twitch and Twitter to stay up to date on his thoughts and ideas about gaming culture.